None of you guys ever thought about running for office? Because, even when you did that, you did the debate in here for the congressional seat, and, those guys are all lightweights. They're all weaklings. I can rip those guys apart in 5 seconds in a debate, and I can't imagine, we just look at this, Wendy, at these races. I can't be smarter than all these people, but somehow they're dumber than me. I don't know how this happens.
I do know how that happens. So that's a great question, Jimmy, right? How do the politicians get dumber than Jimmy Dore?
Yes.
Let's explain, okay?
And I'm dumb. I'm not smart.
Okay. No, it's the consultants. The consultants come in because when you're going to run a race, what are you going to do? Okay, you're going to do what you're going to ask around. You're going to say, how do I do this thing, right? Because you've never run a congressional race before. So then you ask around and people tell you the Democratic Party in your state already exists, and they come in, the handlers come in, and they go, okay, first of all, if you're going to run, the question is, can you win? So the second question on whether you can win is, are you rich? And if you're rich, they're like, great, okay, then we're super excited. And then the third question is, okay, well, if you're not rich, do you know a lot of rich people? If the answer is yes, okay, then we can move on again, right? And I know a guy who went through this process. They didn't even ask him what his policy positions are. Never asked them. They just asked, are you rich? Do you know rich people? Right. So that's already incredibly depressing. But okay, then they bring in the consultants, assuming you can afford them. And then so the consultants say, all right, here's what you're supposed to do. And 90% of them are Washington suits. They do the same stupid strategy that almost never works. That's why Progressive Change Campaign Committee, which is a real progressive group, goes in there for real progressives and tries to help them and says, no, don't listen to them, don't listen to the consultants. Okay, here's how we got one of the worst guys in Congress in Virginia. Do you remember the guy who said we should ban all mosques and we should ban all Muslims from coming in?
Was that?
No, it was, now I'm blanking on it. No.
He's a Republican.
No, so he was in a house in Virginia's district that included Charlottesville.
The House member.
Yeah, and they're like, oh no, it's a red district, you can't win. And Progressive Change Campaign Committee came in there and they helped a real progressive candidate win in that seat.
Tom Perella.
Tom Perella.
I interviewed him when I was guest hosting this show.
Yeah. He was a good guy who won, right? Yeah. So now look, but it's tough because he only won in one term, and then it is a red district, and if you don't run it exactly right, it's not an easy thing to do, right? But 9 out of 10 times the consultants come in and they go, okay, first of all, you have to run a lot of TV ads. Why do they say that? Because they get paid on commission. Okay, so the more ads you run, the more flyers you run, it's all connected to their friends. They're all connected companies, right?
I think you're being overly cynical about it.
Okay. All right. Well, so we'll get to if it's overly cynical in a second, but this is a part of how this works. And so now, but the thing is, you can run any ad you want. They're going to get paid the commission either way, right? So Rove actually does this on the Republican side, and a lot of people got mad at him after 2012 because he made a killing on the commissions, on the ads, but the Republicans didn't win. So Rove got rich, but none of his candidates won. So now, the ads that you run, the Democrats are scared of their own shadow. Okay, so now one is that's the common way of looking at it, right? So the consultants will tell, don't be overly aggressive. Don't do that. No, bring it back down, right? And so, but there's a reason behind it. And it's the reason we talked about earlier in the show, which is they say if you run that populist ad going after corporations, including some of the corporations that are in this state, you won't get the donations that you need to continue to run this race. Because if you're in New Jersey, for example, Johnson & Johnson is a huge company in New Jersey. You're going to need money from Johnson & Johnson in order to win this race, right? So you can't go out there and say income inequality, because the guys who run Johnson & Johnson are the ones who are the benefactors of that income inequality. I'm being unfair to that particular company. Just fill in the blank on any company in any state, okay? I'm not trying to pick on them, etc., right? So now again, the consultants get paid based on how much money you have, right? So they don't want to offend the donors for a couple of reasons. One, they think legitimately, well, you're not going to win if you don't have money. 19 out of 20 times, the guy with more money wins the congressional race. The other reason is, if you don't have the money, you can't pay me. So don't offend the donors. Don't offend the donors. Bring it all the way down, run a really soft campaign. And so, I mean, hit him on the margins, like, hey, we're for Social Security sometimes. Yay, Medicare sometimes. I think that is a process that brings you the mush that are the Democratic candidates. Whereas the Republicans can be stronger, quote unquote. Why? Because if they say, oh yeah, we're even more pro-corporations. You should give more tax cuts to the rich and the corporations because it'll trickle down and it'll help you. And they rip the Democrats' face off. There's no downside. They get more money when they say that, right? If they go further right, they almost never run into an issue unless it's like a particular issue where progressives happen to have more money, like gay rights. They finally run into an issue
They
there.
run into it on the social issues.
On some of the social issues, like Wall Street, which is not the only people giving money, but they're a big chunk of the money, right? They happen to be more socially liberal, so they get uncomfortable with the Huckabees of the world and the guys that are like, oh, the gays are terrible and pro-life and all that stuff. Now, they're going to get past a lot of that, but on the gay rights issue, some of the hedge fund guys are gay. They just happen to be, just a matter of percentages. They have people who in their family who are gay. So that's how they swung New York into being pro-gay marriage. They said to 4 Republicans who'd always voted against gay marriage, you vote for gay marriage, we'll give you a bribe, legal bribe. And it was, and they did a fundraiser for him right after they voted that way, gave him $125,000.
This is where I'm slightly more cynical than you, Cenk. Although I think some of this stuff might be a little more nuanced. But on the what I worry about is that on the social issues, gay marriage and so on, that it isn't even a conscious. It may even be a conscious effort by Wall Street to say, give them that. First of all, they don't care personally. Most normal people don't. Well, who cares what you do in your private life? We can use that, distract people from economic inequality, economic injustice. We can make it all about social issues, distract them, and just say, hey, look, Democrats are liberal, and you're voting for a liberal because they're for the social issues, and completely forget the economic issues that are tearing this country apart.
In fact, if you split people based on race, the immigrants are coming in, they're taking your jobs, then it focuses their anger on all the wrong places instead of all the right places. But the reason on gay rights we're winning is because, one, we just have so much more money than people who are against gay rights in terms of donations.
That's true.
There's a huge chunk of the Democratic Party's base, but it's not just the Democratic Party. As I said, it's the Republican Party too. A lot of Silicon Valley guys fund the Republican Party. Some of them, again, just by chance.
Most of them.
Some of them from San Francisco happen to be gay, right? So those guys, they say, wait. You want to bash immigrants, you want to bash, the other guys and distract people. Okay, I can live with it, to Richard's point, right? You're going to bash me? Nah, I can't live with that, right? So that's why we're now winning on that issue, and that's why the Republicans have backed away from it. So it seems that I always bring it back to money in politics. But because I really believe that is the central issue, right? From there, that central hub, all the spokes come out. It has so many effects. And one of the effects is, hey, you know what? You can't upset the donors. They're the rulers of this country. And now, again, the donors are varied. I'm a little cynical. Richard's even a little more cynical. Ben is less so. They're human beings. They're not all evil characters out of a James Bond movie.
We all end up at the same place. It's not all about ads. The consultants, the consultants want to win more than anything. They want to win because they get hired again. That's what makes you, and just human nature. So
I agree. It's not that it's like the consultants like, I don't care if we don't win. Yeah, I'm gonna take the money. Because if they win, they get more money, right? So even if all they cared about was their self-interest, because they would get rehired, they get hired by more people, their stock value would go up in a manner of speaking. So all those things are true, and the donors are not comic book evil villains. But at the same time, if you set up a system where the most important thing is who's got more money, well, obviously the politicians will cater their campaigns to the people who have money. And that also obviously favors a system that is going to be center-right. Because the position of the center-right is, we do tax cuts for the rich, we deregulate for the rich and for corporations. That is the center-right position. And by the nature of the system, both Republicans and to a large degree Democrats will gravitate toward that position where the money is.
Also, once you're there, and why we see so many people who we have high hopes for sort of disintegrate when they get there, is that fighting against that is just almost an impossible task. And getting reelected becomes your number one priority. And as we've learned, what all freshman members of the House do is raise money. 70% of the time they can't even eat lunch. They're members of Congress. They can't even eat lunch.
I literally had a conversation with a Democratic congressman, and I said, "Who do you hang out with lunch?" I just thought it was kind of an interesting question. We're walking a long way, and I said, "Is it Democrats? Do you ever have lunch with Republicans? Do you ever go bowling with Republicans?" Right? And he said, "We're not allowed to have lunch. If your staff catches you having lunch, they're like, what are you doing? Get back in there and hit the phones. Because you have to spend at least 50% of your time raising money. And so you don't get to have a leisurely lunch unless it's a fundraiser, or unless it's part of your schedule, et cetera. Now, is that, I'm sure, a little bit of an exaggeration? Of course, at some point somebody's going to grab a turkey sandwich while they're not making a phone call, of course, right? But overall, he's describing what generally happens in Congress. I mean, what a sick, perverse system where our so-called representatives are begging for money from the people that they're going to take legal bribes from.
Right.
And how do you beg for that money? When you ask somebody a favor, what are you going to do? What's the
Promise
national
them.
thing?
You're gonna
Promise
promise
them something, of course. That's how the world works.
That's absolutely right, and there's another piece of this that I'm always going on about, but again, it's like an anthropology problem, right? I mean, when you spend 4 hours a day talking to people who have the frustrations and the interests of the wealthy, because they are the wealthy, you start to, you know, I made a big study of this. I've asked Congress people like you have, I've asked consultants, I've asked pollsters, why can't you convince people in Washington to run on the issues that win? Why can't you convince them to run on Social Security expansion, minimum wage increase? Why is it so tough? You know, a Pryor who went down today waffled on the minimum wage issue. Why can't you get people to stand up? Is it just the donor thing? And they all say, you know, that's part of it, but the other piece of it is they're all afraid. There's a culture that's now shared by everybody. Oh no, you can't get too far out on the left. And all they hear all day, morning, noon, and night is, well, you know, this tax thing is really breaking our back. You know, we've got to, and it becomes, you know, I had that face-to-face meeting with the Secretary of the Treasury, who can't be named, but whose initials are Tim Geithner, where you know, you talk to these people, it's like talking to the children of the damned. They've taken this psychology so deep within them that the eyes glaze over when you say, why can't you give principal reduction for homeowners who were screwed by their banks? That would be rewarding the undeserving. You know, it's like,
Said Tim
wait a
Geithner, who
minute,
gave away
wait a
literally
minute.
trillions of dollars to the banks.
Bailing out Goldman Sachs wasn't rewarding the undeserving. But that's the psychology, that's the culture of the super wealthy. The undeserving over there. Now, where's my tax break?
I got to add one quick thing to that. Larry Lessig makes a great point about that. He says, look, it's not necessarily, again, it's not an evil thing, it's not an immoral thing, it's just, it's the people you're in the room with. Do you not get influenced by the people you're in the room with? And
Exactly.
They're
That's
constantly in the room with rich people,
My
right?
point.
With people who already have achieved a certain degree of power. Again, it's not to denigrate the rich, right? And like here, one of the most liberal congressional seats in the country is here in California, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills.
Right.
It's the one we had the debate for here, the 33rd district. It's one of the most liberal. It's also one of the richest. So you can't make blanket generalizations, but the donors are financially motivated to be in a certain direction, and that's all that they ever listen to. When they're on the phone, they're not on the phone with a guy driving a truck because he doesn't have any money.